Howdy folks, it's raining leaves, well at least this time of the year. If you got leaves, a yard and a lawnmower, then may I suggest an easier route to handle this little situation? Why bother raking, collecting, bagging these leaves and then either throwing them away in the trash and fill up the landfills or potentially drive them to some yard waste disposal site. Instead, if you got a yard, a lawnmower and those leaves, you can simply mulch those dry, rattly things in place. Plus, I'm sure your back muscles will thank you for that as well. So, take that lawnmower, remove the collection bag, and mulch away. Not only that this is less work, but also the fact is that these leaves contain high amount of nutrients necessary for healthy lawn and soil for the next seasons. Over time, these leaves release nitrogen for a healthier lawn. Personally, I do not even fertilize in the fall at all. I just use those leaves as essentially as a slow release fertilizer. These mulched leaves continue to break down over time and they feed the microbes and also the worms in the soil, and those little wigglers further enrich your topsoil in your yard. By mulching these leaves in place, we will let the rain, snow, sun, worms, and of course time to do the remainder of the hard work and break those down. Think of mulched leaves as a slow release natural fertilizer. At least that's the way I think of it. And as I said, I don't even fertilize in the fall in the yard at all. And the best bonus is that this removes unnecessary task of raking all of those leaves, bagging it, and like I mentioned earlier, either driving them to a dump site or fill up landfills if you are throwing them away. The process is simple. I only use the rake around the perimeter of the yard to get the leaves from the edges inward, from where the lawnmower cannot easily get to in order to do a good mulching job on those leaves. Otherwise, once they are removed from the perimeter or from the areas where the wind may blow them, obviously get that rake and move it back to the grassy areas or the yard areas. And then I just use the lawnmower to mulch them. Of course, don't use the collection bag when you're mulching it. That's the idea, that you're mulching that in place. In the early stages of the leaf falling process in the fall, one pass is usually adequate for me, and I do not bother doing it a second time as long as the leaves are small enough that the wind is not going to blow them away. However, if needed, you can do multiple passes. The reason I don't do multiple passes in the very initial stages is because I know in a couple of days to a week, I'll take that lawnmower again and mulch the rest of the leaves that has fallen since the last time I did it. So I just kind of do it on a one pass basis for the early stages until we have enough leaves that actually do merit multiple passes. And the reason I do that is, of course, so that they're small enough and the wind doesn't blow them away. Toward the end of the process, then I'll definitely do multiple passes for sure to make sure they're small enough. Remember, you do not want to smother the grass. You should be able to clearly see the grass growing, not smothered with leaves. That's why we're mulching it. For those wondering why bother mulch at all, well, the reason for this is that if you leave the whole leaves in place, they will take way too long and too much time to mulch on their own, and then they will smother and kill the grass that is under them. They may also create a moisture collection area and potentially develop diseases or fungus. Plus, it may actually invite some unwanted critters in that habitat. Not something that you want in your yard, unless you're keeping in a wild area and you have acres and acres of land. Then that's a different situation. By mulching the leaves, they get to the point that they're small enough to start the breakdown process, and they also do a slow release of the needed nutrients. They feed the worms in the ground, and then those worms make more fertilizer for you and enrich your soil. By mulching the leaves, they get to the point that they're small enough to start the breakdown process, and they act as a slow release agent for the nutrients, and they also feed the worms in the ground that ultimately also fertilize the soil and give you a lot of benefits from that perspective. In the backyard area, for example, where I do not have large trees or leaves, I easily find a neighbor who did all of the hard work for me already of collecting and bagging those leaves, and then I can take a bag or 10 and treat it as their early Christmas present to me. A thank you card is optional under these circumstances. If you do not have such neighbors, no worries. You may visit your local leaf drop site and collect some leaves from there. When mulching larger number of leaves, I highly recommend you also wear a mask, as things can get dusty sometimes. And always do it when the leaves are dry. When bringing bagged leaves into your yard, like I'm doing it in my backyard here, one thing not to do is exactly what I'm showing you here. Do not spread all of the leaves from the bag in one area of the yard. That is just too much leaves. I will show you why as an example here in a second. What you want to do is spread it in the yard, in the areas where the lawnmower can go, and also have reasonable number of mulch instead of having it piled all in one area. You do not want the mulch to be too high. You still need to be able to see the grass. It should not cover the grass when it is mulched. Even though the lawnmower can actually handle and mulch those larger piles, you will see that it is just going to be too much. When there is too much mulch on the grass, you will see that you'll have to work much harder than to move it, and since the leaves are already mulched, the raking process to move it from one area to the next is going to be much more work, aggressively requiring you to use the rake to do that. So don't do this. This is just to show you as an example how it should not be done. Since the leaves should be small, raking it is going to be much harder, so keep that in mind. A couple of other items and things to note and address. A common question here is, what if I still have too many leaves? Well, there are a couple of things that you can do. First, as you mulch it, you'll see a lot of those leaves really get mulched and reduced a lot. So you can actually do quite a bit more than most people think in terms of mulching it. But if you still have way too many leaves left after you mulch them and you do actually have a pile of leaves, like we said earlier, you don't want to smother it, well, you can still mulch it and collect that mulch and use it in other areas of the yard. You can use that those mulched leaves to prevent weeds in the area of the yard where you would normally put some kind of mulch to protect the soil from drying or from also the cold. So this mulch acts as an extra layer of protection for plants in the winter. It's another great way to use it there. If you decide to bag the mulch for next season, you can also do that. However, if you do this, make holes in the bag, multiple large holes, so that there is enough air coming through the bag in order to let it air out as the leaves break down. They'll still break down, just not as fast, obviously, when they are under the elements. You can also add those mulched leaves into your compost pile. It's another great way to use and complement your compost pile for those that do that. And if you need to, and if you have a large area on the yard, you can also compost those leaves on their own. It will take quite a bit of time. It is a longer process on their own, but it will take 2 to 3 years before they break down and essentially turn back into soil. Well, the last thing that I do if it is a nice weather day is put some water on the grass. It can definitely use it, and when the mulched leaves get wet as well, it starts the whole decomposition process. Of course, it will take weeks and months ahead to completely decompose and compost. Well, folks, this is the end of the video. I hope you have found this video helpful and beneficial. If you have any tips or suggestions or improvements to this whole mulching of the leaves process, definitely let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Take care. Bye now.